Revenge with Karen.
I knew the ship was sinking before we even hit the iceberg. In fact, I was the one meticulously counting the lifeboats, while the captain was busy snorting crushed-up Adderall off the navigational charts. They called it a tech unicorn, a $2.3 billion valuation built on buzzwords, vaporware, and the collective delusion of a venture capital firm that hadn't seen a profit since the dot-com bubble popped. I'm Paula. I'm 45. I live in Jersey, and I have a resting face that says I've read the footnotes on your expense report, and we both know that strip club wasn't a client dinner. My official title was Chief Compliance Officer. My unofficial title was the bitch who says no. For 16 months, I lived inside the regulatory colon of this company. I scrutinized every S1 filing, every risk disclosure, every clause that kept the SEC from turning our office into a crime scene tape exhibit. An IPO isn't a party. It's a colonoscopy performed by the federal government, and I was the doctor holding the camera. The office vibe in those final weeks was like a frat house the morning before finals, if the frat house was located in a WeWork, and everyone was high on greed. You could smell it, a mixture of nervous sweat, stale LaCroix, and the distinct, metallic scent of unearned arrogance. The engineers were picking out colors for their Lamborghinis. The sales team was already spending commissions that didn't exist yet. And then there was Brad. Brad was our CFO. Brad was 32, wore loafers that cost more than my mortgage, and had a smile that looked like it was calibrated by a focus group to maximize trust while minimizing accountability. He was the kind of guy who used synergy as a verb and headcount as a euphemism for human beings. He treated compliance like a pesky rash, something to be ignored until it became unsightly. Paula, he'd say, leaning against my doorframe with that casual lean that says I own this building. Why are we bogging down the narrative with all these risk factors? The investors want a dream, not a disclaimer. Because, Brad, I'd reply, not looking up from my dual monitors, if we don't disclose the fact that our proprietary algorithm is currently held together by duct tape and 3 interns in Belarus, the SEC will put us in federal prison. And orange really isn't your color. He'd laugh. That hollow, breathless laugh that rich people do when they think the help is being cute. You worry too much, P, that's why we pay you. That was the dynamic. I was the brakes, he was the gas. We were hurtling toward Wall Street at 100 miles an hour. Now, before I tell you how I burned this entire kingdom to the ground with a single signature, do us a small favor. If you've ever had a boss who made you want to drink bleach for breakfast, hit subscribe, and maybe give this story an upvote. It fuels our cold, dead heart. Anyway, back to the impending train wreck. The week before the IPO was Hell Week. The filings were finalized. Roadshow was done. The bankers were salivating. The air in the office was electric, vibrating with the anticipation of the bell ringing on the NYSE. I had spent 14-hour days ensuring that every I was dotted and every T was crossed. My eyes felt like they were filled with sand. My blood was 80% espresso. I had missed my niece's piano recital, my own birthday dinner, hadn't had a conversation with my husband that didn't involve the words section 404 in 3 months. I was the invisible glue holding the valuation together. I was the one who caught the fact that the CEO's brother-in-law was technically a related party transaction that needed to be disclosed before it became a headline. I was the one who scrubbed the investor deck of claims that were borderline fraudulent. I was the safety net. So, the calendar invite popped up on my screen that Friday afternoon. I didn't think much of it. Subject, org structure sync. Host, Brad CFO. Location, the Glass Fishbowl Conference Room A. I grabbed my notebook, a physical one, because I don't trust the cloud with my unfiltered thoughts, and marched down the hall. I assumed it was a last-minute panic attack about the quiet period. I assumed he needed me to soothe some jittery board member, assumed I was part of the team. I walked into the conference room. The glass walls were soundproof, which was a feature I usually appreciated. Today, it would be a tomb. Brad was sitting at the head of the table. The VP of HR, a woman named Sharon who had the emotional depth of a crouton, was sitting next to him, refusing to make eye contact. There was no coffee. There were no notebooks open. There was just a single manila envelope on the table. Close the door, Brad said. His voice didn't have the usual sales guy lilt. It was flat. Clinical. I sat down. I didn't ask what was going on. I've been in corporate America long enough to know the smell of an execution. It smells like cheap carpet cleaner and betrayal. We've been looking at the post-IPO OpEx. Brad started, not looking at me, but a spot on the wall just above my left ear. The street wants to see leaner margins. We need to show efficiency. Okay, I said, my voice steady. We can look at the external counsel budget. I've been saying for months that Latham and Watkins is overbilling us for. It's not legal counsel, Paula, Brad interrupted. He finally looked at me. His eyes were dead sharks swimming in a sea of viscine. It's the compliance headcount. It's too heavy for a mature public company. I blinked. We aren't a mature public company, Brad. We haven't even rung the bell yet. And I am the compliance department. And 2 paralegals. Exactly, he smiled. A tight, thin smile. We're outsourcing the function. We found a firm that can handle the monitoring for 1/3 of the cost. The board agreed this morning. He slid the envelope across the table. Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately. We're offering you 2 weeks of severance if you sign the NDA today. We need your badge and laptop. I looked at the envelope. Then I looked at Brad. Then I looked at Sharon, who was aggressively studying her cuticles. You're firing the chief compliance officer 3 days before the IPO? I asked. I wasn't shouting. I was genuinely curious about the level of stupidity I was witnessing. Brad, do you have any idea? The filings are done, Paula, he snapped, his facade cracking just a little. The S1 is locked. The auditors signed off. Your job is done. We don't need a babysitter anymore. We need profit. He checked his watch. Security will escort you out. Don't make a scene. It's a small industry. A scene? Oh, Brad, I don't make scenes. I make policy. I stood up. I didn't touch the envelope. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a cold, hard knot of clarity form in my stomach. It was the same feeling I got when I found a discrepancy in a ledger, the realization that the numbers didn't add up and someone was going to pay. I don't need the severance, I said, smoothing out my skirt. And I don't need the escort. I know the way out. Brad looked relieved. He thought he had won. He thought he had just cut $250,000 of fat from his bottom line to impress the street. He had no idea he had just cut the brake line on his Ferrari. The walk from the conference room to my desk was the longest mile of my life. The open plan office was buzzing. A sales guy was ringing a gong, literally ringing a brass gong, because he closed a deal. Someone popped a bottle of Prosecco near the kitchen. Balloons that spelled out IPO ready bobbed against the ceiling vents. I was a ghost walking through a celebration of my own funeral. Sharon, the HR crouton, trailed 3 steps behind me like a nervous undertaker, probably making sure I didn't steal a stapler or smash a monitor. She didn't need to worry. I treated my exit like I treated my audits. Methodical, precise, completely documented. I reached my desk. I picked up my purse. I picked up the framed photo of my cat Barnaby. I left the company laptop. I left the badge. We need your phone too, Sharon squeaked. If it's company issued. It's not, I said. And neither is my dignity, Sharon, so back off. I took the elevator down to the lobby. The security guard, heavyset guy named Tony, who I'd brought donuts to every Friday for 2 years, looked confused. Leaving early. Is Paula? Permanent vacation, Tony, I said, forcing a smile. Keep an eye on the place. It's about to get interesting. I walked out into the humid Jersey City air. It smelled like exhaust and low tide. I hailed a cab, sat in the back, and finally, for about 30 seconds, I let my hands shake, just a little tremor. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the crushing weight of humiliation. I had given this company my blood, sweat, and sanity, had fixed their messes, hid their bodies metaphorically, and ensured they were legal enough to go public. And they discarded me like a used toner cartridge because Brad wanted to pump the stock price by a fraction of a penny. But then the shaking stopped, because my brain, my beautiful, broken, rule-bound brain, clicked onto something. Brad said, the filings are done. He said, the S1 is locked. He was right. The documents were drafted. They were approved by legal. We're sitting in the secure server, ready for transmission to the SEC and the NYSE. But here's the thing about bureaucratic systems. They are designed by people like me, for people like me. They require specific keys. In our rush to get everything ready, the external law firm had set up the final transmission protocol through an internal gateway. To prevent unauthorized leaks or premature filings, the system required a dual authentication digital signature from the designated authorizing officer on the morning of the IPO to release the final pricing amendment and effectiveness letter. Guess whose name was on the line for designated authorizing officer? Not Brad's. He didn't have the compliance certification. Not the CEO's. He was too busy doing podcasts. It was me. I was the key man, or rather, the key woman. My digital certificate, linked to my employee ID and my biometric login, was the only thing that could push the button to make the stock tradable. And Brad had just fired me. He had terminated the employee ID. He had revoked the access. By firing me, he hadn't just removed a cost center. He had bricked the entire launch sequence. I pulled out my phone. I could have called them. I could have sent a text to the general counsel saying, "Hey, you morons, need to file a Form 8K to change the authorizing officer and get a new digital key issued by the SEC, which takes 48 hours minimum." If I were a team player, I would have done that. If I were a good person, I would have done that. But I wasn't a team player anymore. I was a liability. I was too expensive. I opened the Sex Edgar filing app on my phone, the public-facing one. I logged into my personal credential account, one I keep for my own professional certification. I navigated to the company's profile. I saw my name listed as the contact for compliance and regulatory affairs. I clicked Update Status. I typed 2 words, "Officer separated," then I hit Submit. It wasn't a sabotaging act. It was a compliance act. I was legally required to notify the board of my termination to ensure I wasn't held liable for future filings. I was just following the rules. The cab driver looked in the rearview mirror. "Bad day at work, lady." I looked out the window at the skyline, where the company's logo was probably being projected onto a building right now. "No," I said, a genuine smile finally creeping onto my face. "Actually, I think it was a very productive day." Saturday morning in New Jersey is usually the sound of lawnmowers and regret. For me, it was the sound of silence. I didn't get out of bed until noon. I lay there, staring at the ceiling fan, listening to the phantom vibrations of a work phone that was no longer on my nightstand. Usually, my weekends were a triage of panic attacks, emails from Brad at 3 a.m. asking if we could legally categorize a strip club visit as team building, or the CEO wondering if he could tweet about the stock price without going to jail answer. No. Now, nothing. I made coffee. I sat on my porch. I watched my neighbor, Dave, struggle to assemble an IKEA bookshelf. It was peaceful. It was terrifying. My husband, Greg, was cautious. He walked around me like I was an unexploded bomb. He knew how much of my soul was wrapped up in that job. "You okay, Han?" he asked, putting a plate of scrambled eggs in front of me. "I'm fine, Greg," I said, poking the eggs. "I'm just waiting for what? For the other shoe to drop. Or rather, for the shoe to realize it doesn't have a foot inside it anymore." I opened my laptop, my personal MacBook, stickers of cats and I3 spreadsheets on the lid. I logged into LinkedIn. It was a bloodbath of toxic positivity. My feed was clogged with posts from my former colleagues, photos of the pre-IPO gala Friday night. Brad was there, holding a microphone, looking like a youth pastor who just discovered cocaine. "So proud of this team," the caption read. "We built this from nothing." Monday morning, we changed the world. #unicorn, #IPO, #grindset. There was Sharon, clinking glasses with the CEO. "Dream team, culture is everything." I scrolled past a photo of the legal team, 3 junior associates who looked like they hadn't slept since 2019. They were smiling, but their eyes were screaming for help. They didn't know. They assumed someone else handled the final authorization. They assumed Brad had a plan. Ding. A notification popped up in my private email. Not LinkedIn, my old, dusty Gmail. Sender, Sarah Jenkins, Talent Acquisition, BlackRock. Subject, we heard a rumor. I raised an eyebrow. The body count wasn't even cold yet. "Hi, Paula. Rumor on the street is your free agent as of yesterday. If true, that's company name S loss and our potential gain. We've been tracking your compliance work on the S1. Impressive navigation of the risk disclosures. Coffee Monday. Have a hole in our oversight division that needs a heavy hitter." I took a sip of coffee. It tasted better than it had in years. I typed back, "Make it Tuesday. I'm going to be busy watching a fire on Monday." Sunday dragged on. The temptation to intervene was a physical itch. I could call the external counsel. I could save them. It would be the professional thing to do. But then I remembered the envelope. "You're too expensive." Remembered the times Brad had asked me to massage the numbers. I remembered the nights I stayed late fixing his mistakes while he went to Knicks games. I remembered the absolute, unmitigated gall of firing the safety inspector while the plane was taxiing to the runway. I wasn't the villain here. I was the karma. Sunday night, I poured a glass of Pinot Noir and turned on CNBC. They were doing a segment on the upcoming week's IPOs. And the big one to watch, talking head shouted, is company name. Valuation seeking $2.3 billion. This is the darling of the tech sector. The CFO, Brad Miller, says they are operationally leaner than ever heading into the launch. I laughed, a dry, rasping sound. Leaner, I whispered to the TV. You have no idea, Brad. I went to sleep like a baby. A baby who knows the nursery is rigged with C4. Monday morning, the day of the reckoning. I didn't go to Wall Street, didn't go to the office. I went to Frank's Diner in Hoboken. It's a place where the menus are sticky, the coffee tastes like battery acid and despair, and nobody asks you about your EBITDA. I sat in a corner booth with a view of the TV mounted above the counter. It was tuned to CNBC, volume low, closed captions on. 9:00 a.m. The pre-market coverage was in full swing. The camera cut to the floor of the NYSE. There was the podium. There was the banner with my old company's logo. There was Brad, standing next to the CEO, clapping like a seal. He looked fresh, rested. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than the diner I was sitting in. I ordered eggs over easy. And keep the coffee coming, I told the waitress. I'm watching a comedy. 9:15 a.m. The bell ceremony was starting. The CEO rang the gavel. Confetti cannons fired. Everyone cheered. Chiron on the screen flashed. Ticker set to open. Indicated price, $24, $26. I took a bite of toast. I checked my watch. At this exact moment, in the back offices of the exchange and the clearing houses, the systems were attempting to handshake with the company's filing server. They were looking for the effectiveness order, the final digital key that says, yes, the SEC has blessed this mess, and the authorized officer has signed off on the final pricing. The system would be pinging my employee ID. My employee ID would return a user-disabled error. The system would then check the backup. The backup was, oh wait, there was no backup, because Brad cut the redundant headcount to save $40,000 a year. 9:29 a.m., the countdown. The floor traders were gathered around the specialist post, waiting for the first trade. 9:30 a.m., the market opens. The bell rang. Trading started across the board. Green numbers, red numbers, flashing lights. Except for one ticker. On the screen under the smiling face of Brad, the ticker for our company sat frozen. Ticker, no price, no volume. I leaned forward. 9:32 a.m. The smiling faces on the podium were starting to twitch. The CEO was looking at his phone. Brad was looking at the specialist, who was frantically typing on his terminal and shaking his head. On the TV, the anchor frowned. Looks like we have a slight delay on the opening of company name. Probably just a technical glitch. High demand, maybe? Technical glitch, I muttered, sure. 9:35 a.m., the banner changed. It turned bright red. Trading halted, regulatory imbalance. The text scrolling at the bottom of the screen was pure poetry. NYSE reports unable to verify final effectiveness filing. Authorizing signature missing or invalid. I saw Brad pull his phone out, was tapping furiously. Then he stopped. He stared at the screen. He looked around the podium. He looked like a man who had just realized he walked into a gunfight carrying a banana. The waitress came by to refill my coffee. Honey, you okay? You're grinning like you just won the lottery. Better, I said, watching the chaos unfold on the screen. I just watched my ex-boyfriend crash his car. By 9:45 a.m., the rumors started hitting the financial blogs. I refreshed Twitter on my phone. At Stock Guru, hearing rumors that company fired their compliance chief on Friday and forgot she was the only one with the SEC keys. Elmau, #amateur hour at Wall Street bets. Short this thing to oblivion. If they can't file a form, they can't run a company. The camera cut back to the podium. The confetti was still on the floor. The smiles were gone. Security was moving in to escort the executives off the floor, not because they were in trouble yet, but because they looked like idiots standing there while their stock failed to launch. Brad looked pale. He looked like he was about to vomit on his $5,000 loafers. I finished my eggs. I wiped my mouth with a paper napkin. My phone, sitting on the table, lit up, caller ID Brad Miller. I let it ring. It rang again and again. I picked it up, looked at the screen, and then pressed the red decline button. I wasn't ready to talk. Not yet. The price of my consulting fee was going up by the minute. My phone didn't just ring, it had a seizure. After I declined Brad, the CEO called. Then the general counsel. Then Sharon from HR, probably calling to ask if I could pretty please come back and fix the $1 billion error she helped facilitate. I put the phone on Do Not Disturb, dropped a 20 on the table for a $10 breakfast, and walked out into the sunshine. Had a meeting to prepare for. I took the PATH train into the city. The contrast was delicious. On the screens in the train station, the news was looping the disaster. IPO disaster, tech giant stumbles at the gate. I arrived at the BlackRock offices in Midtown at 11 o'clock a.m. The air conditioning was crisp, the glass was clean, and the people looked like they actually knew what the word fiduciary meant. Sarah, the recruiter, met me in the lobby. Didn't look like a recruiter, she looked like a shark in a Chanel suit. "Paula," she said, shaking my hand with a grip that could crush walnuts. "You're trending on Twitter, I saw," I said. "I assume that's not a disqualifier?" "Disqualifier?" She laughed. "We're a hedge fund, Paula. We profit from chaos. And rumor has it you're the architect of this particular chaos. Our general counsel wants to meet you. Now." We went up to the 40th floor. The conference room view was panoramic. Sitting there was a man named Mr. Henderson. Gray hair, pinstripes, eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. "So," Henderson said, sliding a bottle of Pellegrino across the table, "let me get the timeline right. They fired you Friday. They didn't revoke your SEC standing. They didn't appoint a successor. And they tried to go public this morning. That sums it up," I said. "And you didn't tell them?" I took a sip of the water. "Mr. Henderson, on Friday afternoon, was told I was too expensive for the company's future. I was stripped of my access and my duties. It would have been a violation of my NDA to perform any work duties after my termination. Warning them would have been work." Henderson looked at Sarah, then he looked back at me. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face. "I like her," he said. "She's dangerous. We need dangerous." While we were discussing my potential future, my past was burning down. 12:30 p.m., I finally checked my voicemail. Message 1, Brad, Paula, pick up. "We have a technical glitch. We need your login. Just text it to me. Hurry." Message 2, Brad, Paula, seriously, this isn't funny. The exchange has halted us. Legal says we need a signature. Call me. Message 3, CEO, Paula, this is CEO name. There's been a misunderstanding regarding your departure. We need to discuss a consulting arrangement immediately. Name your price. Message 4, Brad, screaming, "You did this on purpose. You vindicative bitch. I'm going to sue you into the ground. Pick up the phone." I played the screaming message for Henderson. "He sounds upset," Henderson noted dryly. "He's about to be unemployed," I said. "The SEC doesn't like it when you lie about having a compliance officer. It's considered material misrepresentation." "Indeed," Henderson said. "So, Paula, we want to hire you. Senior VP of Compliance. Double your old salary, bonus structure that would make your old CEO weep." "I accept," I said, "but I can't start until next week." "Why?" "Because," I said, checking my watch, "I have a feeling I'm going to be hired as an independent consultant by a very desperate tech company in about 10 minutes. And I have a very specific rate in mind." "How much?" Sarah asked. $600 an hour, I suggested. Henderson shook his head. "Paula, look at the stock ticker. It's at zero. They are losing millions in reputation every second. Don't insult them with $600. He leaned in. "Ask for $1,500 and a written apology." I smiled. "I like the way you think." By Tuesday morning, the narrative had shifted from technical glitch to fraud investigation. The SEC didn't just keep the trading halted. They sent a formal inquiry letter. A company claims to have a compliance officer on their S1 filing, but that officer is sitting at home watching Netflix while the CFO screams into a void. The feds get curious. I was sitting in my living room, wearing pajamas and a mud mask when the courier arrived. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a contract. It was from the company's external law firm, Latham and Watkins. A partner I knew, a decent guy named Mike, had sent it over. Scope of work, interim compliance remediation. Rate, $1,500/hour. Term, until IPO effectiveness is restored. Attached was a sticky note from Mike. I told them they were idiots. "Please help us fix this before I get disbarred." I signed it, but I added an addendum. Work to be performed remotely. No direct contact with Brad Miller. All instructions must come through the board of directors. I faxed it back. Yes, legal still uses fax. It's harder to hack. Within an hour, I was logged back into the system as a consultant. The digital wreckage was impressive. In their panic, the junior team had tried to override the signature requirement by uploading a PDF of my old signature. That was a felony. I screenshotted it immediately and sent it to Mike with the subject line, "Do you want to go to jail or should I delete this?" He replied instantly, "Delete IT." Oh God. I spent the next 6 hours untangling the knot. I had to file a Form 8K disclosing the departure of the compliance officer, me. I had to file an amendment to the S1, appointing an interim officer, also me, but expensive me. I had to draft a letter of apology to the NYSE explaining the administrative error. I was fixing the house I had been kicked out of and charging them a mortgage payment every hour to do it. But the real twist wasn't the money, it was the internal comms. Because I had my admin access back, I could see the internal Slack channels. The Hash General channel was a dumpster fire. Are our options worthless? I bought a boat on credit on Friday. Help. Brad is in the boardroom with the lawyers. I heard shouting. Then I found the Hash exec private channel. Brad, she sabotaged us. We need to spin this. Say she was incompetent and we fired her for cause, and the delay is us fixing her mess. CEO, Brad, shut up. The lawyers say if we slander her, she walks. If she walks, the SEC audits us for real. We are hostage. Brad, I can't believe we're paying her this much. It's extortion. General counsel, no, Brad, it's the market rate for stupidity. You fired the only person who knew how to start the engine. Pay her. I took a screenshot of that, too, for my scrapbook. Then my phone rang. It was the chairman of the board, a serious man named Arthur, who usually only spoke to God and other billionaires. Miss Paula, he said. His voice was gravel and old money. Mr. Chairman, we have a board meeting tomorrow morning. Emergency session. We need you there to present the remediation plan to the investors. I'm working remotely, sir, as per my contract. Paula, he said, and the tone dropped. We need you in the room. The institutional investors are threatening to pull out. Need to see the person in charge of compliance is competent, and currently you are the only person they trust. I'll be there, I said, but I have one condition. Name it. I want Brad in the room, and I want him to stay for the whole presentation. Arthur paused. Done. I hung up. I looked at my closet. I needed a suit, not my worker bee suit. I needed my executioner suit. I pulled out a vintage Armani blazer I'd bought at a consignment shop years ago and never had the guts to wear. It was sharp enough to cut glass. Tomorrow wasn't just a meeting. It was an autopsy. Walking back into that building on Wednesday felt like entering a parallel dimension. The IPO-ready balloons were deflated on the floor, looking like sad, wrinkled grapes. The reception desk was unmanned. The silence was heavy. I stepped off the elevator on the executive floor, heads turned. Whispers started. Is that her? That's Paula. She looks taller. I walked into the boardroom. The long mahogany table was full. The board of directors, the CEO, the general counsel. And at the far end, looking like he hadn't slept or showered in 48 hours, was Brad. He looked at me with pure venom. I looked at him with professional indifference. Miss Paula, Arthur, the chairman, nodded. Thank you for coming. I took the seat at the opposite end of the table from Brad. The power dynamic was palpable. Let's cut to the chase, Arthur said. The SEC has suspended our offering. The NYSE is furious. BlackRock is asking if we are running a Ponzi scheme. Miss Paula, what is the status of the compliance remediation? I opened my folder. I didn't use a slide deck. I used paper. Mr. Chairman, I began, my voice clear. Filings are currently being corrected. The issue wasn't a technical glitch. It was a failure of governance. Objection, Brad snapped. He couldn't help himself. It was a process error. You failed to hand over your credentials before you, Brad, I said, cutting him off without looking at him. My credentials are biometric. Unless you wanted to cut off my thumb and keep it in a jar, they couldn't be handed over. You would know that if you had ever read the Compliance Protocol Manual, Section 4, Paragraph 2. The room went silent. Furthermore, I continued, sliding a document down the table. Here is the email log from Friday. You can see the timestamp of my termination, 2:15 p.m. You can see the timestamp of the attempted illegal upload of my old signature by your team, Monday, 9:45 a.m. I looked at the general counsel. That's forgery, by the way. The general counsel put his head in his hands. Trying to make us look bad, Brad hissed. You're bitter because we let you go. This is a shakedown. Brad, Arthur rumbled. Be quiet. No, let him speak, I said. I turned to face him fully. You fired me to save $250,000 a year. In the last 48 hours, the valuation of this company has dropped by approximately $400 million based on pre-market gray market trading. You stepped over a dollar to pick up a dime. You fell off a cliff. I stood up. I have restored the filing status. The SEC is willing to lift the halt on Friday if they receive a signed attestation of control. Great, the CEO said, looking desperate. Sign it, please. I can't, I said. Why not? Brad shouted. That's what we're paying you $1,500 an hour for. Because I said, dropping the bomb. As a compliance officer, cannot attest that the company's internal financial controls are sound as long as the chief financial officer is a man who attempted to defraud the SEC on Monday morning. I pointed at Brad. He tried to fake the filing. I have the logs. If I sign off on this company while he is still the CFO, I am complicit. And I don't do complicit. I looked at Arthur. It's him or me. If you want the IPO to happen Friday, Brad has to go. Today. For cause. Brad stood up, his face red. You can't do this. I built this finance team. I own the relationships. You own a halted ticker, I said. The room held its breath. The air conditioners hummed. Arthur looked at Brad. He looked at the plummeting stock charts on the screen. He looked at me standing there in my thrift store Armani. Brad, Arthur said softly, pack your things. Watching a narcissist implode is a bit like watching a controlled demolition. It's loud, dusty, and ultimately inevitable. Brad didn't go quietly. He threatened to sue the board. He threatened to leak stories to the press. He screamed that he was the visionary. Security, my friend Tony, was called up. Escort Mr. Miller to his office to collect his personal effects, Arthur ordered. Then escort him out of the building. His access is revoked immediately. I stood in the hallway and watched. Brad walked past me, a cardboard box in his hands. He stopped. You think you won? He sneered. Just a bureaucrat, a paper pusher. Nobody remembers the compliance officer. That's the point, Brad, I said, sipping a coffee I had liberated from the executive lounge. Ideally, nobody should notice us. We're the foundation. You only notice the foundation when the house collapses because some idiot tried to save money on concrete. He stormed into the elevator. The doors closed. I didn't feel a rush of joy. I felt a profound sense of balance. The universe, for once, done the math correctly. I went back into the boardroom. The atmosphere was different. The air was thinner. They looked at me with fear. So the CEO said, his voice trembling slightly, Brad is gone. Will you sign the attestation now? Yes, I said, but I have one more condition. Anything. I want the junior associate team, the ones Brad tried to throw under the bus for the forgery, to receive full immunity. And a raise. They were following orders from a superior. I won't have their careers ruined. The CEO nodded. Done. I sat down at the head of the table, Brad's old seat. I pulled out my laptop. I inserted my digital key. I opened the SEC portal. Status, remediation complete. Officer, Paula last name interim. Action, request to lift halt. I clicked submit. It's done, I said. Trading should resume Friday morning. Thank you, Paula, Arthur said. We would like to discuss you staying on permanently. CFO role is open. You know the numbers better than anyone. It was a tempting offer. CFO, the corner office. The salary that would let me retire in 5 years. I looked around the room. I saw the fear in their eyes. They didn't respect me, they feared me. They didn't want me because I was a leader. They wanted me because I was a hostage negotiator who happened to be on their payroll. No, thank you, I said. Why? Arthur asked, genuinely shocked. Because I said, standing up and closing my laptop. I already accepted a job at BlackRock. I start Monday. My job is to audit companies like this one, to find the Brads before they crash the plane. I picked up my purse. I'll bill you for the week. You have my address. I walked out. I didn't ring a gong. I didn't pop champagne. I just took the elevator down, waved to Tony, and walked out into the Jersey City smog. It smelled like victory. Friday morning came again. This time, it wasn't at a diner. I was in my new office at BlackRock on 52nd Street. My desk was mahogany. My chair was ergonomic. My view was Central Park. On the wall, a massive flat-screen TV was tuned to CNBC, 9:29 a.m. The camera was back at the NYSE. The banner was up again. The confetti cannons were reloaded. The CEO of my old company was there, looking humble. He rang the bell. He didn't cheer. He just clapped politely. 9:30 a.m. The ticker flashed. Ticker, $22.50 it opened. It didn't crash. It didn't halt. It just traded. It was boring. It was stable. It was compliant. Hey, new girl, I turned around. Mr. Henderson was standing in my doorway. I see your old friends finally managed to launch, he said, gesturing to the screen. They had some expert help, I said. I saw the invoice you sent them, Henderson laughed. Bold. They paid it yesterday. I said wire transfer. Cleared this morning. You know, Henderson said, leaning against the doorframe, most people would have just let them crash and burn. You fixed it. Why? I looked at the screen. I saw the faces of the junior analysts on the floor, the ones whose jobs I saved. I saw the investors who didn't lose their pensions because I stepped in. Because I'm a compliance officer, sir, I said. I don't like messes, even the ones I didn't make. He nodded, impressed. Well, welcome to the big leagues, Paula. We have a file on a biotech firm in California. Their CFO just bought a private island, but they haven't shipped a product in 3 years. Take a look, I smiled, a real smile, not a corporate grimace. Send it over, I said. I love a good island. He left. I turned back to the screen. The stock was ticking up slightly, $22.75, $23.00. I took a sip of my coffee, expensive corporate coffee that didn't taste like battery acid. I opened my drawer and pulled out the check stub from my consulting fee. The total was staggering. It was enough to pay off my house. It was retire on your own terms money, earned by simply refusing to be fucked. I thought about Brad, probably sitting in his overpriced apartment, updating his LinkedIn to say he's a strategic visionary in transition. I picked up my pen, a nice, heavy Mont Blanc that I treated myself to. Some people think revenge is a dish best served cold. I disagree. Revenge is a dish best served with a W-9 form and a legally binding invoice. I turned off the TV, back to work.